My name is Donna Hayes, and I'm a single parent. What I'm about to tell you is a story about the devastating price of vanity, a price paid by a family who thought success could be manufactured and inherited, regardless of character. The truth of that night still echoes in my heart, a cold, hard reminder that true worth is built from the inside out. If you listen closely, I think you'll hear the lesson hiding beneath the surface of the story. For over 30 years, I worked as a master gemologist and appraiser for Bancroft and Sons, one of the world's most prestigious and highly secretive auction houses. My life wasn't about selling jewels. It was about knowing their soul, their clarity, their history, their true, irreplaceable value. I didn't just authenticate stones, I authenticated stories, geological epics, and political histories. My expertise wasn't just in the 4CS, it was in the fifth C, context. I operated at the rarefied pinnacle of the global gem market, a level where stones are not just commodities, but instruments of power and symbols of history. I've held in my hands the legendary Cullinan III and the fourth diamonds for valuation purposes, those breathtaking drops of the original Great Star of Africa, handling them with the specialized gloves and reverence usually reserved for state documents. My work involved navigating complex offshore trusts, handling the private sale of entire collections belonging to defunct European nobility, and advising sovereign wealth funds on the geological sourcing of rubies from conflict zones, a process that required deep, quiet knowledge of geopolitics and ethical compliance, far removed from the glitz of a storefront. My routine involved quiet negotiations with mining magnates in remote parts of Western Australia, coordinating private jets for secure transport, and securing assets in reinforced, climate controlled vaults in Geneva, London, and New York. I signed non disclosure agreements that were multi generational, effectively rendering me a ghost in the public sphere. Untraceable, unsearchable, and unknown outside a very specific elite circle. This anonymity was mandatory for security and invaluable for my personal freedom. My monthly income? Let's just say it hovered far above the $40,000 mark for the last 2 decades of my career, consistently placing me in the top tier of international wealth managers, with a personal investment portfolio built from equity partnerships in the mines themselves and high yield, low risk ventures that consistently eclipsed my annual salary. I was a silent, meticulous leviathan in a world of glittering, visible sharks. I understood the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is what you show, wealthy is what you hide. And my wealth was profound, measured in the decades of quiet accumulation and strategic investment. But my son, Marcus, bless his heart, never knew the slightest detail of this life. He lived entirely in the shadow I cast, a shadow of carefully constructed normalcy. To Marcus, I was simply Mom. I was the woman who lived a life of quiet, predictable simplicity, a simplicity I curated with the precision of a master clockmaker. I still lived in the same modest, 2-bedroom apartment that I bought nearly 40 years ago, in a perfectly adequate but utterly ungentrified neighborhood. I paid cash for the unit 30 years ago and never took a mortgage. Its true value was its lack of financial overhead. The building's 1930s charm was fading, the communal boiler hissed, and the exterior desperately needed paint, all of which I deliberately allowed because it conveyed the exact impression I needed. Struggle, or at least stagnancy. The apartment itself, while clean, was furnished with solid, functional, inexpensive pieces from the 1990s, a faded, comfortable sofa, a particle board bookcase, and a slightly wobbly kitchen table. The only items of real value were hidden. The fireproof document safe behind the linen closet, containing not only deeds and bonds but also a few unregistered gems, and the discreet, high-tech security system, which was better than the one at most regional bank branches. I drove a reliable 10-year-old compact car, a sensible Japanese model, a Honda Civic that I kept meticulously maintained, but which certainly conveyed no sense of luxury or ambition. It was the perfect gray blur. My clothes were sensible, functional, and frankly, forgettable, purchased primarily for comfort and durability during my brief weekend breaks from international travel. I favored neutral colors and natural fabrics that didn't demand attention. When Marcus asked about my job, which was rare, I'd simply smile and say, "I work in the city, dear. I handle old stones and paperwork. Mostly documentation and archival work now that I'm retired from the bench work." He assumed I was a clerk at a local jewelry repair shop, maybe a specialist in antique pottery appraisal, or perhaps, at best, an overqualified secretary surviving on a modest pension. Someone ordinary, nothing special, and I never corrected his assumption. Why this deliberate silence? Why this meticulous facade of simplicity? Because I wanted him to see me, Donna, the woman who raised him on simple recipes and unwavering moral principles. I needed him to love me without the glittering distraction of my bank account. I learned early that people treat you fundamentally differently when they know your net worth. They replace genuine connection with transactional calculation. The shift is instantaneous and permanent. I needed to know who Marcus was becoming without the corrupting influence of easy money, and I needed to ensure he was not prey for those who only saw a potential inheritance. I grew up in an era where dignity was carried within, where silence was worth more than hollow words. So I guarded my truth. I saved everything, invested everything, and became rich in silence. Because true power doesn't shout. True power observes, calculates, and waits. The most valuable things in life, love, integrity, and character, cannot be bought or appraised by external value. They are, in fact, priceless precisely because they resist calculation. And I was observing very, very closely when Marcus called me that Tuesday afternoon. His voice was strained, wrapped in a thin layer of anxiety I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught sneaking out past curfew. Only this time, the stakes were far higher than grounding. He and his wife, Simone, were hosting a dinner party. But this wasn't just any dinner. It was a high-stakes performance designed to cement their position in Simone's social hierarchy. "Mom," he rushed, the words stumbling over each other, "it's a networking dinner. It's really important. Simone's parents will be there. Her father, Philip, is a massive investment banker. He deals with huge portfolio management, hedge funds, private equity, the works. He's a gatekeeper, Mom. And her mother, Michelle, a socialite? Well, she's a gemologist, too. A high-end one specializing in luxury auction house acquisitions in Europe. They're very successful, Mom, very modern. They're coming straight from Europe, very jet set." There was that familiar, subtle cringe in his tone, the sound of a man trying to apologize for his own origin. The same cringe I'd noticed since he married Simone, a beautiful girl whose family defined themselves by their polished, aggressively visible success. They lived in a world where who you were was defined by what your parents drove and where they summered. Their entire social structure was based on a ruthless hierarchy of wealth display that valued appearances, social climbing, and connections above all else, often referring to people like me as legacy poor. This dinner wasn't a family gathering. It was a security clearance meeting for their new in-laws. Michelle and Philip were there to assess Marcus's entire family background, the foundation of his character, and, more importantly, the potential drag of his poverty. "They want to meet you," he continued, the plea evident. "At the Chandelier restaurant on Saturday. Please, Mom, just be yourself. Don't make a fuss. Don't make a fuss." The implication was brutally clear, and it stung more than he could ever know. Don't be yourself, the simple, old-fashioned mother, and embarrass me in front of these important people who could advance my career. The shame he felt was not for them, but for me. I knew instantly what this meeting was about. They were assessing the in-laws. They are the same people who, barely a year ago, treated me like an inconvenient piece of furniture at my own son's wedding, too preoccupied with visible guests to notice the mother of the groom. Now, they were checking the background of the woman who raised the man, who was trying to climb their social and financial ladder. The scrutiny was not about my well being, but about their social risk assessment. Was Donna Hayes going to be a financial or social liability? Do they know anything about my job, Marcus? I asked, my voice smooth, even a quiet probe. Marcus stammered, shuffling papers on his desk. I could hear the nervous rustle. I told them you retired last year. I said you used to work for a local jeweler, mostly dealing with resizing and repairing old family pieces. You know, nothing corporate, just simple. I told Simone that your pension is small but manageable. There it was again, the word simple, like a dirty secret. It was the filter he used to present me to his ambitious wife and her family, as if my entire life could be contained in that miserable adjective, as if I were a problem he needed to apologize for. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting the insult settle. Okay, Marcus, I'll be there, and I'll be exactly who you told them I am. Don't worry about a thing. I hung up and looked around my living room. At that moment, I decided if my son was willing to introduce me as a poor, simple woman, and if his in laws were coming ready to judge, then I would give them exactly what they expected to see, magnified and undeniable. I would pretend to be broke, naive, and desperate. A mother barely surviving on Social Security, clutching at dignity with worn out clothes. I wanted to feel firsthand how they treated someone who had nothing, not just as an exercise in anthropology, but as a crucial, final test of their character. I wanted to see their true faces because I suspected something dark beneath the polished veneer. I suspected Simone, and her parents were the type of people who measured others by their bank accounts, their labels, and their superficial connections, believing wealth granted them the right to cruelty. And my instinct, honed over decades of spotting fraudulent stones and detecting the minute stress-induced flaws in human character, never fails. Saturday arrived, bringing with it a crisp, indifferent autumn air, the kind of weather that matches a mood of cold calculation. The tension inside me was not fear, but a cold, surgical focus. This was not a dinner. It was an audit, a forensic examination of their true moral worth, and I was the item under review. I was preparing for this evening with the same meticulousness I once used to prepare a multi-million-dollar diamond for auction. Every detail had to be authentic to the lie. I bypassed my tailored suits and silk blouses. I bypassed the small, fireproof safe where I kept my authentic antique jewelry, including the flawless, 3-carat D flawless engagement ring I kept as a personal memento of my success. I needed to look genuinely neglected. I dressed in the worst outfit I owned, a light gray, shapeless, wrinkled polyester dress, the kind they sell at a thrift store near closing time. It was drab, lifeless, and utterly failed to flatter my figure, designed purely to make me vanish. I put on thick-rimmed, tortoise-shell reading glasses that weren't my prescription, purchased cheaply and deliberately oversized, just to convey a vague sense of age, visual impairment, and mild confusion, the classic markers of a well-meaning but struggling senior citizen. Old, worn-out shoes, the kind that prioritize arch support and durability over style, a pair of ancient leather slip-ons, the ultimate social transgression in their world, were deliberately scuffed and cleaned just enough to emphasize their age. I grabbed a faded canvas tote bag, pulled my silver hair back into a messy, slightly frizzy ponytail, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman broken by life, struggling to make ends meet, living on the margins. Forgettable, easily dismissed. Perfect. The only thing missing was a cough, which I considered adding but discarded as being perhaps too theatrical. The poverty had to be subtle, a persistent scent of failure, not a dramatic explosion. I got into a taxi, ignoring the 10-year-old Honda Civic in my driveway. I gave the address, a high-end, newly opened restaurant, the Chandelier, in the most exclusive part of the city, the kind where the menu doesn't list prices, the lighting is too dim for reading, And the waiters look down their noses at anyone who dares to order water without asking about its source and vintage. This was the same restaurant where, just last year, I had hosted a corporate Christmas party for 50 senior partners from Bancroft and Sons, spending what Marcus earns in a year on one evening's entertainment. The irony was a bitter tonic, sweetening my resolve. As we drove, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and sadness. Anticipation because I knew the fireworks were coming, and the reveal would be satisfyingly devastating. Sadness because a small, foolish part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would treat me well, that they would be kind, that they would look past the old clothes. But the other part, the one that had worked 30 years among corporate sharks, that part knew exactly what was waiting for me. I was mentally preparing for a hostile negotiation. The taxi stopped in front of the restaurant. Warm lights spilled onto the pavement, and a doorman in white gloves ushered in elegantly dressed people. I paid the fare, making sure the canvas tote was prominent, took a deep breath, crossed the threshold, and there they were, perfectly framed by the window. Marcus was standing next to a long table near the windows. He wore a dark, conservative suit, a crisp white shirt, and shiny shoes. He was dressed for success, but looked profoundly anxious, like a man waiting for the executioner. Beside him was Simone, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tailored cream dress with gold accents, high heels, her perfectly straight hair falling over her shoulders. She looked impeccable, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking towards the entrance with a tense, almost embarrassed expression, already anticipating the social disaster I represented. And then I saw the main event. Michelle and Philip, already seated at the table, waiting like royalty on their thrones, radiating an aura of self-satisfied entitlement. Michelle, Simone's mother, was striking, a sharp, angular beauty dressed in a fitted emerald green dress full of sequins. Jewels glittered conspicuously on her neck, wrists, and fingers. I instantly recognized the centerpiece of her neck, a delicate platinum tennis necklace, likely 3 carats total weight, which I mentally pegged at $18,000 retail. And crucially, I spotted a minor inclusion under the light that would drop its value significantly in an auction setting. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant, severe bun. She had that cold, calculated type of beauty that intimidates, a beauty that seemed to advertise its cost and demand deference. Beside her was Philip, her husband, an immaculate gray suit tailored in Milan, and on his wrist, a giant, distracting watch. I didn't need to squint to identify the model. A Rolex Daytona Panda dial, conservatively appraised at over $45,000 on the secondary market. Both looked like they had stepped straight out of a luxury magazine, ready to pass judgment on the rest of the world. They were the visible sharks, perfectly tailored and completely exposed. I walked toward them slowly, deliberately taking short, timid steps as if I were afraid of the polished marble floor. Marcus saw me first, and his face instantly crumpled. His eyes widened, darting desperately between my wrinkled dress and the impeccably dressed in-laws. I noticed him swallow hard, his cheeks coloring with immediate, painful shame. "Mom, you said you'd come." His voice was low, uncomfortable, laced with accusation, as if my appearance was a betrayal of his minimal social request. "Of course, son, here I am." I smiled timidly, the fragile smile of a woman unaccustomed to such opulence, radiating a nervous gratitude for being included. Simone greeted me with a quick kiss on the cheek, cold, mechanical, and slightly averted. "Mother-in-law, it's nice to see you." Her eyes said the opposite, relaying a clear message of distress and embarrassment. She introduced me to her parents in a strange, almost apologetic tone, rushing the words. "This is Marcus's mother, Donna. She just retired." Michelle looked up, studied me, and in that instant I saw everything. The immediate judgment, the deep-seated disdain, the sharp disappointment at my clear failure to meet their minimum aesthetic standard. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled gray dress, my old scuffed shoes, my faded canvas tote, mentally assigning a dollar value to every thread. She didn't say anything at first, just extended a hand, cold, quick, and weak. "A pleasure." the briefest, most dismissive contact possible. Philip did the same. A weak handshake, a false smile that barely touched his eyes, a flicker of boredom in his expression. Charmed, he drawled, already looking past me to the waiter. I sat down in the chair at the end of the table, the one furthest from them, as if I were a second-rate guest who needed to be marginalized or hidden from the main flow of the room. No one, not even Marcus, helped me pull out my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. I was an afterthought, a piece of undesirable furniture. The waiter arrived with the elegant, heavy menus written in French. I opened mine and pretended not to understand the elaborate, pretentious language, frowning slightly at the unfamiliar terms. Michelle watched me, a faint, superior smirk forming at the corner of her mouth, her gaze calculating. "Do you need help with the menu, Clara?" she asked, with a smile that was all surface, utterly devoid of genuine kindness, but heavy with theatrical concern. She even got my name wrong, a deliberate minor slight that implied I wasn't worth the effort of remembering. "Yes, please," I replied, my voice coming out small, timid. "I don't know what these words mean. They seem rather complicated. Perhaps something simple like a salad, or maybe some chicken?" She sighed dramatically, a tiny performative sound of exasperation designed for Marcus's benefit, and took charge, seizing control of the ordering process. "Just order for her, something simple," she told the waiter, glancing at the cheapest, most basic section of the menu, the fish of the day, plainly prepared. "Something that doesn't cost too much. We don't want to overdo it for a simple dish. She has a sensitive stomach, I think." The phrase hung in the air like poison, like a bad smell. We don't want to overdo it. Meaning, we don't want to waste money on the poor mother who won't appreciate the complexity or cost and whose lack of refinement dictates her budget. Philip nodded in agreement, a smug confirmation of Michelle's budgetary wisdom and social judgment. Marcus looked away, fiddling violently with his water glass, his shame palpable, agonizing. Simone played nervously with her napkin, her expensive lipstick mark already smudged on the rim of her glass, a tiny, imperfect detail in her otherwise flawless appearance. And I just watched, cataloging every microaggression. Michelle started talking first, dominating the conversation with casual mentions of wealth designed to exclude me. She spoke of the journey from abroad, how tiresome the private lounge at the airport had been, and how difficult it was to find good staff for their properties overseas, especially the summer rental in Antibes, which required a chef who understood both Provençal and modern Japanese cuisine. She boasted about her recent purchase of a vintage sports car for Philip, a little weekend toy, a collector's item, which she claimed was a low-end investment of only about $80,000, scoffing at the mere number. Then she subtly began the financial interrogation, the social X-ray designed to reveal my lack of capital. She mentioned the penthouse apartment they were purchasing, overlooking the park, detailing the astronomical price per square foot. She mentioned the luxury car Philip had just gifted her, a German foreign model, of course, specifying the exact custom leather interior. She mentioned the exclusive stores they had visited that afternoon. "We bought a few things," she said, dismissively waving a hand weighed down with gold bracelets. "Nothing major, just a few $1,000s on a new silk scarf and some accessories. It's just a necessity when you maintain a certain profile, right, Philip? One has to look the part to be taken seriously." She spoke, carefully looking at me, expecting a reaction, expecting me to be impressed, intimidated, or both. She was disappointed by my complete lack of reaction. I just nodded, my eyes wide and naive, the picture of wide-eyed, provincial innocence. "How nice," I murmured. "That's lovely, such pretty colors. You must have wonderful style, dear." Michelle continued, leaning into her condescension, enjoying the power imbalance. "You know, Donna, we've always been very careful with money. We worked hard. We invested well. Now we have properties in 3 countries, soon 4. Philip has major businesses, and I oversee our entire portfolio and manage my acquisition work. It's demanding, but one must ensure the legacy." She smiled, a triumphant flash of superiority. And you, Donna, she transitioned, her tone suddenly sweet but the underlying venom undeniable. What exactly do you do? Marcus mentioned you retired from a local bench. What did that involve exactly? Filing antique claims? Her words were laced with the assumption of irrelevance and small town insignificance. I work in an office, I replied, lowering my gaze, performing my shame perfectly. I do a little bit of everything: paperwork, filing, simple things. Mostly local history archives now that I've retired from the bench, documenting old family assets for estate purposes. Michelle exchanged a knowing, patronizing look with Philip. Ah, I see. Administrative archival work. That's fine. It's honest. All jobs are dignified, right? But we just worry about retirement planning for those who haven't had the benefit of a corporate pension and solid investment advice. The market can be brutal for the unprepared. Of course, I replied meekly. The market is a mystery to me. The food arrived. Enormous plates with tiny portions, all decorated like modern art, a visual testament to excessive spending on minimal sustenance. Michelle pointed to her dish with the precision of a surgeon. This is a single scallop dish, she announced to the table, loud enough for the waiter to hear. It costs $80, but it's worth it. Quality is worth paying for. One can't just eat anything, right? You really have to curate your diet and only consume the best ingredients. I nodded slowly, pushing my own simple piece of fish around the plate. Of course, you're right, I'm afraid I'm still adjusting to all this high-end food. Marcus tried weakly to change the subject, talking about his work and some new company projects. Michelle interrupted him, impatient, cutting him off mid-sentence. Son, does your mother live alone, in that neighborhood? Marcus nodded, his discomfort evident. Yes, she has a small apartment. It's where I grew up. Michelle looked at me with feigned pity, a masterpiece of maternal concern, sipping her water. It must be difficult, isn't it, living alone at your age without much support? And does your salary cover everything comfortably? With inflation being what it is, even a fixed income can be stretched thin. Are you on a state pension, dear? I felt the trap closing, the conversation tightening around the thread of my supposed poverty. I barely replied, but I manage, I save where I can, I don't need much. I'm very frugal. I've been budgeting for decades. Michelle sighed dramatically, turning her attention back to the rest of the table, ensuring her audience understood the context. Oh, Donna, you are so brave. Truly, I admire women who struggle alone and manage to keep their homes. Although, of course, one always wishes to give our children more, a better start in life, a springboard, not a stumbling block. But oh well, everyone gives what they can. She lingered on the word can, ensuring the inference was drawn. I could not provide. There was the subtle but deadly blow. She was telling me I hadn't been enough for my son, that I hadn't given him the head start he deserved, that I was a poor, insufficient mother and a financial drain waiting to happen. The ultimate insult was that she pitied my struggle, but valued its outcome less than an outdated handbag. Simone was looking desperately at her plate, wishing, I'm sure, that she could disappear into the wood grain. Marcus was clenching his fists under the table, his knuckles white, his shame palpable and agonizing to watch, and I just smiled gently, almost sadly. Yes, you're right, everyone gives what they can. Michelle continued, enjoying her dominance and the discomfort she was causing. We always made sure Simone had the best. She went to the best schools, boarding school since age 14, traveled the world for her education, and learned 4 languages. Now she has an excellent job, earns very well. And when she married Marcus, well, we helped them quite a bit. We gave them money for the down payment on their house, a full 20% down payment, a proper foundation. We paid for their lavish honeymoon to the Maldives because that's just who we are. We believe in supporting our children. She looked at me intently, a predator sizing up its prey. And you, Donna, were you able to help Marcus with anything substantial when they got married? Did you contribute to the home or the travel? The question floated like a sharp, barbed knife designed to humiliate. Not much, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, playing the part of the apologetic parent. I gave them what I could afford, a small gift for the kitchen. a good set of cutlery, a wedding registry item. Michelle smiled, a triumphant, condescending curl of the lip. How sweet, every detail counts, right? The amount doesn't matter, the intention is what's important. Her eyes clearly conveyed the opposite. The amount was the only thing that mattered, and my gift was worthless. And right then, I felt the rage begin to stir within me. It wasn't explosive. It was cold, controlled, like a subterranean river under thick ice, gathering irresistible force. I breathed slowly, kept the timid smile plastered on my face, and let Michelle keep talking. Because that's what people like her do. They talk, they inflate themselves, they show off. And the more they talk, the more they reveal themselves, the more they expose the brittle emptiness inside, like a low-grade gem under intense magnification. I was waiting for the final, most egregious insult. Michelle took a large sip of her glass of ridiculously expensive red wine, swirling it in her hand as if she were a seasoned sommelier. This wine is from an exclusive micro-estate region in Tuscany, bottled only on special command. It costs $200 a bottle, but it's worth it. Quality is worth paying for. Do you drink wine, Donna? Only on special occasions, I replied truthfully, and usually the cheapest one, a box wine, if I'm honest. I don't understand much about these things. My palate isn't refined, I suppose. Michelle smiled condescendingly, tilting her head. Oh, don't worry. Not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience, with travel, with education in culture. You need exposure to appreciate the complexity. She then launched into a detailed, boring account of her European travels, her expert knowledge of wine, and her cultural superiority, while Philip nodded along dutifully, adding technical jargon about capital allocation and vintage diversification to reinforce their joint intellectual superiority. The performance was exhausting to watch. I sat there, absorbing every pretentious detail, filing it away as further evidence of their shallow nature. This was not just snobbery. This was arrogance built on the foundation of inherited privilege, a kind of cultural vandalism that used expense as a substitute for character. Michelle finally turned to me, her expression changing, becoming serious, falsely maternal, like a doctor preparing to deliver a difficult prognosis. You know, Donna, I think it's important that we talk about something as a family now that we are all here. Marcus tensed up visibly, sensing the shift from social commentary to a direct, painful attack. I don't think this is the time, please. Michelle raised her hand, silencing him with a sharp, impatient glance. Let me finish, son. This is important for your future. She looked at me, her eyes drilling into mine. Marcus is our son-in-law, and we love him very much. Simone loves him, and we respect their decisions. But we always want the best for our family member, and that means minimizing risks. Donna, I understand you did the best you could with Marcus. I know raising him alone wasn't easy, and I truly respect you for that struggle. But now Marcus is at another stage in his life. He is married. He has responsibilities, and well, Simone and he deserve to have complete stability. Stability. I asked softly, carefully performing confusion, leaning into the role of the frail old woman who couldn't quite grasp complex concepts. Yes, Michelle replied, her voice hardening slightly, moving into her scripted pitch. Financial, emotional, and social stability. We have helped a lot, and we will continue to help. But we also believe it's important that Marcus doesn't have unnecessary burdens that pull him backwards. His career is on an upward trajectory, and he needs a clear path. Her tone was utterly clear. She was calling me a burden. Me, his mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. The phrase unnecessary burdens was a calculated, insidious weapon, designed to make Marcus feel guilty, Simone feel justified in her ambition, and me feel worthless. Simone was looking intently at her plate, wishing, I'm sure, that she could disappear into the wood grain. Marcus had his jaw clenched so tightly I thought I heard his teeth grind, his shame boiling over. Burden. I repeated, my voice still small, but with an underlying tremor of performance, a barely controlled tremor suggesting fear. Michelle sighed, adjusting the expensive bracelet on her wrist with unnecessary precision. I don't want to sound harsh, Donna, but at your age, living alone with a limited pension, in that building, it's natural for Marcus to worry about you, to feel that he must take care of you, and that's fine. He is a good son. But we don't want that worry to affect his marriage, his career, or his financial goals. Distractions like this can really limit his career trajectory, Donna. You understand that when you're trying to reach the top, you can't have external pressures demanding his time or resources. Perfectly, I replied, nodding slowly, accepting the blow with false humility. Michelle smiled, victorious, mistaking my silence for submission. I'm glad you understand. That's why we wanted to talk to you privately. Philip and I have thought about something practical. She paused dramatically, savoring the moment of absolute control. We could help you financially, give you a small monthly allowance, something that allows you to live more comfortably, without Marcus having to worry so much about your heating bills or sudden expenses. Obviously, it would be modest. We can't work miracles, but it would be a reliable support. I remained silent, watching her, letting her hang herself with her own greed. She continued, detailing the insidious, cruel offer. And in exchange, we would only ask you to respect Marcus and Simone's space, not to seek them out so much, not to pressure them, to give them the freedom to build their life together without interference. We need you to become a less visible presence in their weekly schedule. We need their energy focused on building their future, not managing your past. There it was, the bribe, the payoff disguised as charity. They wanted to buy me off. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my son's life so I wouldn't be a nuisance, so I wouldn't embarrass their precious family with my poverty. The emotional transaction was brutal. $700 a month for my silence and absence. Marcus exploded, his chair scraping back slightly, unable to contain his humiliation any longer. That's enough. You have absolutely no right to talk to my mother like that. Michelle interrupted him instantly, sharp as broken glass. Marcus, calm down. We're talking like adults about a necessary arrangement. Your mother understands the financial reality, right, Donna? I picked up my napkin, calmly wiped my lips, took a sip of water, and let the silence grow, thick and oppressive, filling the space like concrete. Everyone was looking at me. Michelle with greedy, arrogant expectation, Philip with icy, dismissive confidence, Simone with profound shame, Marcus with desperate anxiety. And then I spoke. My voice came out differently. It was no longer timid. It was no longer small. It was firm, clear, and cold, the voice of a professional who has just detected a catastrophic flaw in a $1 billion deal and is about to issue a devastating report. That's an interesting offer, Michelle, truly very generous of you. However, I have a few questions about the terms of the acquisition. Michelle smiled, relieved, thinking she had won the negotiation. I'm glad you see it that way. Of course, ask whatever you like. We can draft an agreement tomorrow. How much exactly would you consider a modest monthly allowance for me to disappear from my son's life, to become a less visible presence? I ensured her own cruel language was used. Michelle hesitated, caught off guard by the bluntness and my sudden shift in vocabulary. Well, we were thinking about $700, maybe $800, depending on your needs. Let's start with $750 net. We can review it annually. I see, I nodded, the chilling coldness returning to my voice, my eyes hardening to 2 points of clear, concentrated fury. $750 a month for me to disappear from my son's life, for my silence, and for my complete absence. That is exactly how you put it, a payment for my absence and silence. Thank you for clarifying the terms of your transactional contempt. Michelle adjusted in her chair, regaining a sliver of her composure, though her face was etched with sudden defensiveness and confusion. The shift in the wind had been too sudden, too sharp. Donna, I don't want you to misunderstand. We just want to help to ease the financial and emotional burden on Marcus. Of course, I said, the word dripping with sarcasm, coating the air with disbelief. Help? And how did you help with the house down payment? How much was that contribution exactly? You seem to track your generosity meticulously. Michelle, still operating under the assumption of her superior position, nodded proudly, grasping for any scrap of status she could hold on to. $40,000. It was a significant gift, a foundation for their life together. Ah, $40,000. How generous, I mused, leaning forward just slightly, creating an unbearable gravity around the table. And the honeymoon, the 3-week trip through the Maldives, the private villa on the water? $15,000, Michelle supplied smugly. A wedding gift. Incredible, I replied, leaning forward further, my gaze now fixed on her, relentless, a jeweler's loop focusing on a fatal inclusion. So, you've invested about $55,000 in Marcus and Simone's life so far. You're right. When you love your children, you don't hold back. You try to lay a solid foundation. I paused, letting the statement hang in the air, allowing the silence to stretch and snap. But tell me something, Michelle. All that investment, all that money, the full $55,000, which, by the way, is less than the tax write-off on my corporate lease for my London flat, did it buy you anything of real substance? Like, did it buy you genuine respect? Did it buy you real love, or did it just buy obedience, a seat at this table, and the perceived right to audit and humiliate Marcus's mother? Based on tonight's performance, I believe you've only purchased the latter, and at a very high price for such a low-quality return. The atmosphere changed completely, transforming from condescension to pure hostility. Michelle's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a tight mask of shock and anger. Excuse me? You are being incredibly rude and presumptuous. You've spent the entire night talking about money, I continued, my voice gaining volume and authority, leaving no room for interruption. About how much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have, and how little you assumed I had. You boasted about your Daytona and your flawed, 3-carat diamond tennis necklace, pieces I could buy and sell before breakfast without consulting a single person. But you haven't asked even once how I am, if I'm happy, if something hurts me, if I need company, or even what my favorite color is. You have only calculated my worth, and apparently I'm worth $750 a month. A figure, I might add, that wouldn't cover the cleaning services at my main residence. I paused, letting the crushing weight of the contrast land. And do you know what I discovered, Michelle? I discovered that the people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand its true power and are the most dependent on its visibility. They mistake the appearance of wealth for true substance. Philip tried to intervene, his voice sharp with defensiveness. I think you are grossly misinterpreting my wife's intentions, Donna. You are being inflammatory. I looked at him directly, dismissing his tailored suit, his distracting watch, and his millions with a single glance. And what are her intentions? To treat me with pity? To humiliate me throughout dinner? To offer me alms so I'd vanish from the family tree? You know exactly what her intentions were, Philip. They were to test my capacity as a burden and to pay me to disappear. Philip opened his mouth, trying to articulate a defense of his status, but nothing came out. Marcus was sheet white, staring at me with a mixture of terror, confusion, and dawning, staggering pride. Mom, please. Just tell me what's going on. No, Marcus, please don't, I told him gently but firmly. I'm done being quiet. I'm done letting them define me by their shallow standards. I placed the napkin precisely on the table, folded into a perfect square. I leaned back in my chair. There was no more timidity in my posture, no more shrinking. I looked Michelle directly in the eyes, holding her gaze until she finally broke it. Something profound had changed, and she felt the ground disappearing beneath her feet. Michelle, you said something very interesting a moment ago. You said you admire women who struggle alone, who are brave. She nodded slowly, cautiously, desperately trying to find the thread of the conversation she once controlled. Yes, I did. I believe in self-made success. Then let me ask you something, I challenged, my voice a low, steady rumble of authority. Have you ever struggled alone? Have you ever worked without your husband backing you? Have you ever built something with your own 2 hands without your family's money or your husband's portfolio as a net? You talk about curating a life. Have you ever created one? Michelle stammered, scrambling for her shield of achievements. I have my own achievements. I manage our investments. I oversee properties. I make important decisions in our businesses, and I have a career in gemology. Businesses your husband built, I replied calmly, cutting through her defense. Properties you bought together, investments made with the seed money he generated. Or am I wrong? There is a profound difference between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch. Between overseeing an empire you inherited and building it brick by agonizing brick, sacrificing every minute of your life for a single purpose. I let the weight of the last 4 decades settle on them, a testament to my quiet, unseen war. Let me explain the kind of struggle you pretend to admire, I replied, detailing my true origin story. In my mid-20s, I was a secretary in a small import company handling invoices. I earned minimum wage. I lived in a rented room in the basement of a triple-decker building. I was alone, completely alone. Later, I got pregnant. The father, a charming liar, disappeared overnight. My family, conservative and cruel, turned their backs on me, seeing only shame. I had to decide whether to keep going, give up, or fail. I chose to keep going. I worked until the last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after Marcus was born, hiring a retired neighbor with my last savings to watch him during the day. I worked 12 hours a day, often sleeping 3 hours a night, surviving on instant noodles and pure, desperate adrenaline. I paused and drank some water, savoring the shock on my son's face. He had never heard this in such raw detail. The true poverty, the depth of my isolation, the magnitude of my sacrifice. I didn't stay a secretary. I studied at night after Marcus was asleep. I took correspondence courses from the GIA. I learned English grammar from public library tapes. I taught myself accounting, finance, administration, and gemology. I became an expert in things no one taught me, all on my own, all while raising a child alone. All while paying rent, food, medicine, and clothes. I climbed up little by little, from secretary to assistant, from assistant to coordinator, from coordinator to specialist, from specialist to master appraiser, and then to regional director of acquisition. It took me 20 years of blood, sweat, and sheer willpower. 20 years of non-stop work, of sacrifices you can't even imagine. But I did it. And do you know how much I earn now, Michelle? Not what I used to earn as a local archivist. Michelle shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed, the mask of superiority finally shattered. $40,000 a month, I announced, the number resonating with impossible clarity in the silent restaurant, a number so large and so real that it was incontestable. Every month for almost 20 years. That's almost $10 million in gross salary alone over my career. Not counting my investment portfolio, not counting annual performance bonuses, and certainly not counting the company stock I own. I didn't just deal with resizing old wedding bands, Michelle. I was the one who personally signed off on the final, multi-million-dollar appraisal of the Pink Star diamond before it went to Hong Kong. I was the one who quietly brokered the off-market sale of the Blue Moon of Josephine. The silence was absolute, a powerful, deafening shockwave that seemed to distort the air around us. Marcus dropped his fork, which clattered weakly on the plate. Simone's eyes went wide with sudden, sickening realization and horror. Philip frowned in disbelief, his Rolex suddenly looking cheap and flashy. And Michelle froze, her mouth slightly open, the emerald sequins of her dress now looking utterly irrelevant, a child's costume. $40,000, I repeated calmly, ensuring the figure was absorbed. I am the Regional Director of Operations and Acquisition for Vancroft and Sons, North America. I oversee 5 countries and manage the acquisition strategy. I manage investment budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. I make daily decisions that affect more than 10,000 employees worldwide. I sign contracts that you couldn't read without a team of corporate lawyers, and I have done so with integrity and precision for decades. I am not simply rich, I am deeply, globally wealthy and entirely self-made. Marcus was pale, tears welling up in his eyes. Mom, why did you never tell me? Why do you live in that small apartment? Why the simple life? Because you didn't need to know, son, I said, my gaze softening slightly for him, conveying the love that underpinned the secrecy. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. I wanted you to become a person of character, not an entitled heir. I wanted to see if your own life was built on merit, not expectation. Because money corrupts, and I wasn't going to let it corrupt you. I wanted to see if your character was forged in real iron, not plated in easy gold. Simone finally whispered, her voice cracking. Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you drive a luxury car? Why pretend to be someone you aren't? I smiled, a genuine, warm smile of profound self-possession. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth isn't shown off. It doesn't need external validation. Because I learned the crucial truth. The more you truly have, the less you need to prove it to the world. I wear these clothes because they are comfortable. My worth is internal, untouchable, and not subject to your appraisal. I looked at Michelle, who was beginning to shake with a mixture of shame, fury, and realization. That's why I came dressed like this tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor and naive. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. I wanted to see your true colors, Michelle, and boy, did I see them. I saw them perfectly, venomous, condescending, and morally bankrupt. Michelle stammered, frantically trying to salvage her credibility. This is ridiculous. If you earned so much money, we would know. Your name would be searchable. You lied. You deceived us all. I let him believe what he chose, I replied. And my name is searchable, if you know where to look, and if you can penetrate the global financial veil required to find it. I live simply because the money I earn, I invest, I save, I multiply. I don't spend it on flashy jewelry or showing off in pretentious restaurants. That $55,000 you gifted them is less than my quarterly investment portfolio return. It's a rounding error on my balance sheet, Michelle. A mere fraction of my disposable income. Philip cleared his throat, trying to regain the offensive with corporate jargon. Even so, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude, that you misled us, and that you grossly misinterpreted our intentions to secure Marcus's stability. Really? I looked at him fixedly, my gaze challenging his entire profession. I misinterpreted when you called me a burden to Marcus. I misinterpreted when you offered to pay me $750 to disappear from his life. I misinterpreted every condescending comment about my clothes, my job, my life, and my capacity as a mother. You speak of portfolio management, Philip, but your social portfolio is grossly mismanaged. You invested in insult and expected respect in return. I stood up, pushing the chair back with deliberate care. Let me tell you something that clearly no one has ever told you. Money does not buy class. It does not buy real education. It only buys degrees. It does not buy empathy. You have money, perhaps a lot, but you don't have an ounce of what truly matters: dignity, humility, or grace. Michelle stood up, furious, shaking with impotent rage. And you do? You who lied, who deceived us, who made us look like fools in this very public place? I didn't make you look like fools, I replied coldly, the final words hanging in the air like frost. You took care of that all on your own. I just gave you the opportunity to show who you are, and you did it magnificently, precisely to my specifications. Now you know that I saw you, that I felt every comment, that I stored every insult disguised as advice, and that I will never forget it. I am a master gemologist, Michelle. I detect flaws in clarity for a living, and your flaw is fatal, a catastrophic inclusion of vanity and cruelty. I picked up my old canvas tote, placing it gently on the table. I then reached into the hidden internal pocket of the tote, a pocket lined with Kevlar, and pulled out a sleek, heavy, matte black card. This was the legendary Centurion card from American Express, the most exclusive card on the planet, reserved only for those with true, verified, and substantial net worth. I dropped it on the table in front of Michelle, where it landed with a heavy, definitive thud, right beside her single scallop. This is my corporate card. Unlimited limit. Pay for the entire dinner with a generous 50% tip for the waiter who had to suffer through your conversation. Consider it a gift from a broke and naive mother to cover your inadequacy. Michelle looked at the card, black and shiny, with my name engraved in elegant script. Donna Hayes, Regional Director. Her hand reached out, then retracted, trembling slightly, as if the card were radioactive. I don't need your money, she said, her voice broken, deflated. I know, I replied, but I didn't need your pity, your judgment, or your offer of $750 either. And yet you offered it to me throughout the entire dinner. So take it as a gesture of courtesy or good manners, something you clearly didn't learn despite all your travels. You valued me at $750 a month. I value your family's dignity at zero. The waiter timidly approached, sensing the explosive shift in power. Philip abruptly demanded the check, clearly desperate to end the spectacle and avoid touching the black card. Simone finally lifted her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, her perfect makeup ruined. I'm sorry, she whispered to me. I'm so sorry. I knew they were like this, but I didn't know they would. I didn't know you. I know, I interrupted her gently, my voice soft for the first time since the reveal. But you did know how your parents are. You knew how they treat people they consider inferior, and you did nothing to stop them. You have to choose your values, Simone, or their values will choose you. I hugged Marcus tightly, holding the face of the man I had sacrificed everything for. You don't have to apologize, son. I did what I did for a reason, but I won't let anyone use my life as a weapon against you. You have nothing to prove to them. I walked out of the restaurant, my worn-out shoes clacking confidently on the marble floor, leaving them with the check, the black card, and the shattering realization that the poor woman they scorned was their financial, ethical, and moral superior, and that she now held the definitive power in the relationship. Life moves on. The sun still sets over the old part of town, painting the streets in soft, forgiving colors, casting shadows over my modest apartment. The memory of my struggle will always be my strength, a constant reminder that true value is found not in what you acquire, but in how you choose to live and love. I have chosen to live authentically, hidden from the corrosive light of vanity. And as I sit here now, amidst the silence, I know what my true legacy is. It isn't the millions I earned or the gems I certified. No. I learned the hardest, the most agonizing, the most devastating lesson a matriarch can ever face, a lesson that tears at the very fabric of one's purpose in life. It is this, that sometimes the most profound and cruelest betrayals are not inflicted by strangers, but are carried out by the children you raised and by the family they choose. You look at them and see love, but they look back and only see opportunity, a potential obstacle, or a financial resource. But even in that darkness, there is light. Because the greatest truths, the very ones that save your soul and allow you to keep breathing, those truths are often found not in grand pronouncements or legal documents, but in the silent language of a simple dress, in the truth exposed by a platinum card, and in the quiet, desperate courage of a mother who risked everything to know the true worth of her son's life, and to protect him from the hollow ring of false gold. I found my own closure, not by being accepted by them, but by rejecting their entire, empty value system. Did you find Donna's masterstroke of revenge satisfying? I certainly did. The way she used her silent wealth to expose their transactional contempt is just brilliant. Tell me what lesson about self-worth resonated with you the most. Comment below and share your thoughts. Since this channel is new and building steam, your support is absolutely everything to me right now. If you enjoyed this story, please take a second to help me reach more people by sharing this video with friends. Every like and every share truly helps and tells me what kind of stories you want to hear more of. On the screen, you can see two new true life stories that I highly recommend you listen to next. There's so much more coming soon. Don't forget to like and share. See you in the next story, and thanks for watching.